not only those stories, which appeared in the New York Times and the poll of Democrats saying they don't want Biden to run, which the New York Times made that lead story on the front page. Look at the Times' coverage of Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia. It was brutal for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It's as if a flip has switched at the New York Times where they've made the judgment that it's time for a younger, different Democrat to take Biden down, that we don't want Biden to run for re-election. You almost get that sense that they have an editorial change in terms of the headlines on the front page. Now, I'll predict to you, Dave, it's a passing stage. They'll do this until it doesn't work. And then if Biden declares for re-election, all of a sudden the New York Times is going to say, look at the vigor he's got as an 82-year-old man. Look at how strong he is.
A lot of people always ask me, was it always this bad? And I try to, think back. I'm 46. I remember the nightly news on, ABC, CBS, NBC, and it was basically whether you liked Brokaw or Peter Jennings or what's his name, Dan Rather. But that the structure of the show and what they covered was basically the same. They weren't, it was maybe the order was a little bit different, but they pretty much were covering the same things, or Walter Cronkite before that. Do you think there was too much protection over topics that maybe they weren't talking about back then?
Well, protection over topics, what I would say is there was too much of a one-sided nature of storytelling. How often would you see on the news about a good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun and a killing?
Yeah,
because you needed gun control. So if a citizen who had a concealed carry stopped a crime, they didn't tell you about that because that would have made the case for concealed carry. The trial of Hermit Gosnell, which I talk about in my book, probably the greatest serial killer in American history, an abortion doctor who thousands upon thousands of babies. He snipped the spinal cords of babies about to be born, late-term abortionist. And his trial was suppressed. There was hardly any news coverage of it. America's greatest serial killer. Why? Because if the networks went wall to wall with the coverage of that trial, it actually made people think twice about being pro-life or pro-choice. And in a newsroom, that's yucky to have people who think pro-life be legitimized. Nobody thinks like that inside a newsroom. So there was an absence of coverage. And again, this is what gave way to Fox News. Fox said, you're only telling one side of a story. You're leaving on the cutting room floor so much of American life. So that's what was wrong with the three networks back in their heyday. When Reagan was president, some 50 or 60 million Americans watched ABC, NBC, CBS at 6:30 Eastern in the evening. And now only 20 million do. 30 to 35 million went elsewhere. They went to Fox, and they went to the diversification of other outlets.
So when you were press secretary, and there was a little more honesty there, now when you watch, and it's so out of control, and you mentioned Peter Doocy, we show a lot of clips of him on the show, but it's not just that the press themselves are worse. It seems like the press secretaries have gotten much worse. Let's say the last two specifically. That Psaki, the woman simply, I don't think could say a true statement. My line on her was always, if you asked her what her favorite color was, she would say 4. She just couldn't say anything true. And now you got this Karine Jean-Pierre, who actually seems worse. Completely unqualified. Am I overstating it with these two? Am I not giving enough credit to how difficult the job is?
Well, let me put it this way. And here I am old school. The job is hard enough. And I will not make fun or take on a press secretary. I don't think it's fitting for me to do that. I understand people or make the criticisms. I won't be one of those people doing it by name. I just will say their problem is not a communications problem. Their problem is a Joe Biden judgment, decision, policy problem, old age problem. They have a lot of other things that they have to deal with. Other people can take on their communication skills.
Okay, so putting aside the specifics of the two of them, generally as far as the administration right now, it seems like so many things are wrong, and you just mentioned that the media doesn't cover certain things. Finally, it looks like in the last 2 weeks, there are suddenly discussions about what's going on with Biden cognitively, and is he up to the job, and it's even leaking into CNN now. A whole bunch of us were talking about it before the election, but is that another piece of this, that they just airlock certain things, and then we can all see it? We all know something's not right. He can't read off the prompter anymore. The rambling, the incoherent nonsense, not where am I, who's in charge, all of this stuff. But now it's finally leaking, which means that eventually it will fully get through the airlock.
Yeah, and not only those stories, which appeared in the New York Times and the poll of Democrats saying they don't want Biden to run, which the New York Times made that lead story on the front page. Look at the Times' coverage of Biden's trip to Saudi Arabia. It was brutal for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It's as if a flip has switched at the New York Times, where they've made the judgment that it's time for a younger, different Democrat to take Biden down, that we don't want Biden to run for re-election. You almost get that sense that they have an editorial change in terms of the headlines on the front page. Now, I'll predict to you, Dave, it's a passing stage. They'll do this until it doesn't work. And then if Biden declares for re-election, all of a sudden the New York Times is going to say, look at the vigor he's got as an 82-year-old man. Look at how strong he is. And especially if the opponent is Donald Trump, they'll flip right back to their current mode. But it is something to watch right now because it is interesting. They're giving Biden a tough time recently. I'd say to you also, the press was ridiculously easy on Biden throughout the entire campaign.
Mm-hmm.
They had their whole body on the scale because they wanted Trump to be defeated. They suppressed stories that would have hurt Biden, his failure to read off the teleprompter. You know, one of the examples I have in my book is he did at a campaign event for the AFL-CIO. A young woman said to him, threw him a softball and said, well, how do you get more people to join a union? And his answer, this is all on TV, on a Biden video, his answer was, move it up there. And then he gave the answer.
Yeah.
The Q and the A preloaded on a teleprompter. And until they put the teleprompter and made it run, he didn't know the answer to how do you get more people to join a union. What would a normal press corps have done? They'd have pounded the guy. He's about to become possibly the oldest president in the United States history if he wins. He can't even answer a question like that. Did he have a teleprompter? How did he get the answer written there if he didn't get the cue ahead of time? Do you have the people providing you with friendly audiences, giving you questions ahead of time? Everything was all the ingredients for a feeding frenzy.
Would you, if you were part of the administration, would you be trying? I mean, I know they've tried to hide him. He doesn't really do long form interviews. He always gets the notes with who he's allowed to call on, and then if he rambles too long, he says that he's in trouble. Like, none of it makes any sense or is optically positive or any of that. But if you were a press secretary or you were in the administration right now and you saw what was going on, what would you be advising the president to do at this point?
Oh, it's beyond advice. Frankly, there's little to nothing they can do anymore because it's about policy. It's about what's happened to the country. It's about inflation, the cost of living, the cost of gas, energy, heating your home, air conditioning your home, buying food, buying coffee, the southern border, crime. I mean, can you name more tangible things that are hurting the country? You know, it's not like Social Security is going to go bankrupt in 7 years or the Medicare trust fund is going to go bankrupt in 8. It's not these big amorphous things. It's the daily things you feel in life. Yeah. Am I going to get mugged walking home? Can I afford the things I need to buy to feed my family? This is what's happening to our country right now, and it's particularly hitting lower income and middle income people. So it's beyond a speech, it's beyond advice, it's events. And the public gets it, the country gets it. The only thing I could suggest for Joe Biden, if he really wants to change, is he should start going after liberal prosecutors throughout the country. He should support the recall of LA's district attorney.
Yep.
If he started to send a different note that he actually is in the 1990s Joe Biden who wants to protect people's lives and get tough on crime, that could have a different impact. Biden might be seen differently if he did that. There's very little else he can do.
Well, actually, to that point, I mean, does this guy, Biden, strike you as someone very different than you knew of, say, 20 years ago? I mean, it's almost like he's sort of the perfect candidate for the left because he doesn't know what he believes anymore. He reads anything, and he's just ushering in the destruction that I personally, I think that the more radical people want. I don't think he wants to destroy the country. I just don't think he knows what he's doing at this point.
Look, I've known Joe Biden for many decades. I used to work for a different senator, Pete Domenici of New Mexico. I got to know Joe Biden then. I knew him when I was at the White House. And I always knew that Joe Biden was a blowhard. He was just a talker, and he didn't have much depth. He didn't have much substance. As Robert Gates, the former Secretary of Defense to George Bush and Barack Obama, said about every foreign policy decision over the last 30 years, Joe Biden has gotten wrong. And now that's spread to domestic decisions, too. I mean, one of the biggest reasons we have inflation is because Biden insists on that massive blowout government spending redistribution package when he first got elected that he was able to jam through on a party line vote. and he doesn't think that contributed to inflation. Biden just has terrible judgment. Now he just wants to spend more money, and he really has not shown the spine to stand up to the woke left. He's really become Bernie Sanders' running mate as opposed to the nation's leader.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about the media instead of nonstop yelling, check out our media playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out the full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.